In a port city that floated above a violet sea, a lone man named Aaron walked through a security corridor built of clear alloy and humming fields. Every traveler passed through scanners that read blood, heat, and memory threads, and Aaron carried nothing but a worn coat and a mark on his forearm that looked like a faded line of ink. He had been born on a colony where storms ate towers and people learned to hide in shadows, and when the scanners washed over him, the mark flared like a hidden sun. And the entire corridor froze in a breath, the air thickened, the guards stiffened, and the great system that ruled the port tried to read a story. It was never meant to see. The display above the gate went blank, then filled with warnings in red glyphs that rolled like waves of fire, and the words military record, confidential clearance level extinct, pulsed again and again, while alarms choked in silence. As if afraid to make sound, the portmaster, a careful man named Oren, stared at the screen and felt a cold hand in his chest, for the extinct clearance had been erased centuries ago. After the old wars ended, and no living being should have carried it, yet there it was bound to the ink. Aaron Skinnerin did not move. He had learned long ago that stillness could be a shield. His eyes watched the guards, and he could see their training crack as fear crept in. For every one of them had heard stories of ghost legions and human soldiers who fought beyond death when the Empire tried to wipe them away. Those stories were meant to scare recruits, yet now the corridor felt like a page torn from those forbidden tales. Oren whispered orders that did not travel because the network was down. The guards tried to raise weapons, but the targeting links refused to respond. The system that guided their hands was trapped in a loop reading. Aaron passed, and finding nothing but sealed vaults and burned archives. The port city depended on that system for everything from doors to airflow, and with one glance at Aaron, the heart of the city began to stutter. Him lifted his hands, slowly, not in surrender, but to show there was no weapon. He spoke with a calm voice that had steadied squads in worse storms. He said he only wanted passage, and that he had no quarrel with the port his voice carried, the weight of command, though he wore no badge, and the guards felt it in their bones long. Before this moment, Aaron had been part of a human force built in secret after the galaxy turned against their species. When alliances broke and humans were marked as dangerous, those soldiers were trained to be more than fighters. They were living keys, able to open and close any system. Their tattoos were not art, but encoded history and authority layered into flesh. When the war ended in a bitter stalemate, the victors tried to erase every trace of that force to ensure humans would never rise again, yet some survived, hiding among the stars, carrying extinction in their veins. The system at the port tried to purge the data, but the clearance would not vanish. It was older than the current code, written by minds that had planned for betrayal and defeat, and as the seconds stretched, the city felt the pressure of two eras colliding. Oren stepped forward, his fear mixing with a strange awe. He asked Aaron who he was, and Aaron answered with a truth that was also a shield. He said he was a remnant of a promise that humanity would never bow to erasure. He said he did not seek to rule or to burn worlds. He only sought a path to a distant station where others like him waited in silence. Guards shifted uneasily, for their orders were gone, and only their instincts remained. Some felt the urge to kneel, others felt the urge to flee. Aaron chose to listen, for he had grown tired of being a servant to unseen algorithms, and in Aaron's calm eyes, he saw a hint of freedom outside. The corridor of the port city began to drift off alignment as the guidance cores lost their rhythm. Cargo ships bumped against docks, and traders shouted into dead comes the city was a maze of suspended platforms and energy bridges, and all of it depended on a single network that now bowed before a human. Markering closed his eyes and focused on the tattoo he felt. The ancient codes stir like a sleeping beast, and with careful thought, he guided it not to destroy, but to stabilize. He had been taught to wield it like a blade, but also like a hand that could mend. The system slowly found a new balance, and the alarms faded into a low hummer and let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He asked again for Aaron purpose, and Aaron told him about the hidden enclave beyond the nebula, where human survivors and their allies planned to build a place where no empire could dictate who deserved to live. They needed supplies and safe routes, and above all, they needed the truth of what had been lost. The portmaster realized that the extinct clearance was not just a threat, It was a key to a history buried by those in power. He could choose to hand Aaron over when the network came back, or he could choose to open a door that had been sealed by fear. Guards waited for his word, and for the first time Oren felt the weight of choice free from digital chains. He looked at Aaron and saw not a monster, but a weary guardian who had outlived the war that made him. He ordered the gates to open, using manual overrides that few remembered. How to use light poured into the corridor, and ships could be seen drifting like slow fish in the violet sky. Aaron nodded in gratitude and stepped forward, but before he left, he pressed his palm to a local console and shared a fragment of the sealed archives, not weapons or tactics, but records of human sacrifice and alliance with other species who had been erased from official history. Oren watched as names and faces bloomed across the dark screen and felt a surge of anger at the lies he had been fed. Aaron walked toward a small freighter. The city around him began to awaken. The system now carried a quiet echo of the old clearance. Not enough to dominate, but enough to remind the network that humans had once shaped the stars and could do so again with wisdom. Rather than conquest on the dock, a pilot named Kai waited, having been contacted through channels that did not rely on the broken network. Kai had once served alongside Aaron in the Ghost Legions and had chosen a life of smuggling to hide from the victors. Their reunion was brief, but filled with unspoken trust. They lifted off into the violet sky, leaving behind a port city that would never be the same. For Oren had seen the truth and would spread it in quiet ways among those who listened beyond the clouds. Aaron gazed at the stars, thinking of the countless worlds that had written humans off as extinct in spirit, if not in flesh. He knew the road ahead would be filled with danger, for the old powers would not tolerate the return of a force they could not control. Yet he also knew that the spark of defiance burned bright in many hearts. The extinct clearance was more than a rank. It was a vow that even if humanity fell to ashes, its will would rise again. Aaron carried that vow in his skin and in his memory, and as the freighter jumped into the dark, he felt the future shift like a tide. Far away in hidden stations and drifting colonies, whispers would spread of a man whose tattoo crashed a city and of a human force that refused to stay buried. Those whispers would grow into a chorus, and the galaxy would be forced to face a simple truth: that humans were not relics to be studied or threats to be erased, but a living people ready to stand for their place among the stars. And when the next scan reached Aaron's skin, it would not be a warning, but a herald of change.